All right, the president announcing tonight that we remain in lockdown level 4. Some changes, restaurants can open, but alcohol sales remain prohibited. And then let's chat to Mzwandile Mbeje, our political editor. And Mzwa, he also spoke quite extensively. There was speculation, would he, wouldn't he? But he did really go into detail on those protests.
Well, thank you very much, Francis. Of course, you had the president there, and I think many South Africans were really, as much as they expected that perhaps on the issue of the Coronavirus Council and rather related matters, he probably wouldn't move, given that the numbers have really not gone down. So clearly, some sort of making sure that they are not spreading, so was going to be needed. So there, I guess it's not a surprise, but we'll also recognize that in terms of restaurants, so there was a bit of relaxation, and also all of this is calculated to make sure that the economy doesn't grind to a halt. But Francis, I think where the president really came out very, very strong was on the issue of the protests that we have seen in the past days. He basically made it clear that as much as people are allowed to protest, so they can do that peacefully, but once they infringe on other people's rights, they damage property, so law enforcement agencies will take their place. In fact, he even said those people will be followed up and they'll be prosecuted. So sending out a very clear message that vandalism and criminality will certainly not be tolerated. Also sounding a very perhaps grave warning as well, to say what is worrying about some of these protests is that they take a shape of what you call it, a take which is more ethnic based, which is very, very, very a great danger. We know what has happened in other countries, particularly in Africa, when protests take a nature of ethnicity. So it simply cannot build a nation. I think you could see the concern there from the part of the president to say, yes, you have an issue, but we have the rule of law in our country, you have constitutionalism, so which is able to deal with issues, any concern that is there. So that was basically, Francis, the takeaway from what the president said tonight. And obviously, he then emphasized on the issue of vaccination. We had already been told that the 35 and above will now start registering from the 15th of July, and of course on the 1st of August. So people can start getting their jabs, and also laying out the plans that Johnson & Johnson will come on board, and Pfizer has also contributed to COVAX. So the issue really about vaccination is top of his mind. And remember, we are extending by another 14 days, so which means the country remains on level 4. Francis.
Mzwa, do you agree with me? He was hinting about the fact that these protests seem to begin around a protest because of the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma. He said all people are equal before the law. He said the rule of law is there to safeguard the vulnerable, the poor. So maybe that pointing to the incipience of these protests. And then on the ethnic violence, I mean, what have we seen? Because that there might be a suggestion that this is a Zulu demonstration, but we've seen authorities come out and say, no, that is not the situation, and we don't support anything like this.
Absolutely, Francis. I think what the president really said was that the rule of law needs to be observed because it's meant to protect everyone, particularly the poor and vulnerable. So, which means when it applies to anyone, so it must be viewed as such. On the issue really of tribalism, I mean, we've been covering this story quite extensively as the SABC. I mean, some of the people, Francis, that we've been speaking to, they've been saying the reason we are out here because we'll not allow Zuma because he is one of us. Clearly, I'm talking about people who were just open to say because he is Zulu like us. So clearly that, I guess, was a grave concern to the president because remember, South Africa is a non-racial, non-tribalistic. Even if you go back to the founding constitution of the ANC itself, which is the governing party, one of the things they really said was that Hlangana Mzulu Xhosa Msuthu Mshangana. So basically saying we are building one nation. So for people in the governing party to start now mobilize along ethnic lines, clearly that undermines all of that. So that is why the concern was clearly visible, and he said people who really have concerns must really apply the rule of law.
All right, thank you very much, Mzwandile Mbeje, our political editor here at SABC News. Let's go to the CEO of Business Unity South Africa, Kaz Kovadia, joining us for some reaction. Mr. Kovadia, let's start with the lockdown level 4, the extension of that. What do you think of the approach?
Good evening, and thanks for having me. I don't think this was unexpected. The reality is that we are in the midst of the third wave. We are not seeing significant decreases in infections. We are seeing increasing fatalities as a result of COVID. And we are told that the Delta variant, which is very prevalent in the country at the moment, is not under control yet. So I don't think it's a surprise that he maintained lockdown level 4. I think we need to welcome some lifting in the restrictions. I think that restaurants can, provided they meet with COVID protocols, can open to patrons. And I think that is an important move, because the restaurant industry has there's been a devastating effect on the industry. We would have liked to also see, I think, a bit more creativity about the way we deal with the alcohol industry. I think going forward, at least, because I think we're not out of this yet, we would want to see more interaction between the NCCC and the representatives of the liquor industry to see if we can have a more differentiated approach toward that, instead of just blanket restrictions on the industry, because that has had a devastating effect not just on liquor producers, but on producers of glass, on taverns, and other people in the value chain, not to talk about the impact on employment. So, but otherwise, I think expected. I don't think the president could have moved us away from this level, given where we are on the COVID prevalence.
Yeah, and then he moved to the demonstrations that we're seeing. We've been covering that, and the impact here must be enormous. The N3 trucks burnt on Friday night. We spoke to a union earlier saying that the truck drivers are not going to get onto the road because their lives are in danger. Looting happening, so tomorrow even the shops that are allowed to open may not be able to. Firstly, are you alarmed, as Boo said, what is going on?
We've got to be alarmed. I think every citizen of the country has got to be alarmed. We came out with a statement earlier on this, and the bottom line is that, irrespective of what people may feel about the Constitutional Court decisions, the High Court decisions, we must be a law-abiding country that respects law and order and respects decisions by the judiciary. The Constitution allows you to protest, but to protest peacefully without destroying property, without violating the rights of others. This, in my view, what's happening in the last few days, and it's a few people, but creating a great deal of chaos and having a significantly negative impact on the economy and on confidence in the country. But this is thuggery. This is not protest. Let's not call it protest. This is thuggery, and it must be dealt with accordingly. I think the security forces must clamp down heavily on this. We've got to hold the cause, because if we actually give in to this sort of thuggery as a country, then we are gone beyond the tipping point, and we can't have that. So we are very, very concerned. The immediate economic damage is severe. We will see the impact on unemployment, because it will cause more job losses, because, as you say, truckers are fearful of going onto the road. The damage has been severe, but the knock-on effects we will only see in the next few weeks and next couple of months, and they're not going to be pretty. At a time when the economy is already fragile, at a time when COVID is running rampant, and these people have also violated COVID regulations. They must be dealt with. The president indicated that they will be dealt with firmly, but we need to see an increase in security presence. We need to see immediate action in arrests and prosecutions, and government needs to send out a very, very clear message, I think, as the president has done, that we will not tolerate this.
Very quickly, you spoke about tipping point, and there have been alarming predictions about our country because of this incredible unemployment rate that was here before COVID-19 hit. Then poverty, inequality, everything deepening. And what then? So I remember an economist saying that we're heading towards an unviable society, such desperation. Some talking about a spark that could set this off, and we could see mass looting and violence. Do you think we are there, or could this be easily contained, like you say, if law enforcement comes out in force?
Look, I don't think we're there yet, but I don't think we can easily contain this. I think there are some hard decisions that need to be taken. And I think government, and particularly the president, needs to lead us in that. We need to get onto the same page that what we need to attract is investment in the country. We need an appropriate investment environment. And on the back of that, we need to structure inclusive growth so that the vast majority of our people have a stake in this economy. And that's the only thing that's going to actually take us forward. Now, this isn't easy. I think the president has made some bold moves in the last couple of weeks on the embedded energy side, on the Ports Authority side. I think he needs to continue doing that. I think we need some critical decisions on how we're going to create an environment for investment. We need to do that unequivocally. And we need to, on the back of that investment, begin to grow our economy. That's the only way to address both the economic and social problems we have. It's not going to be easy, but we need to do that. Right. In the meantime, I think we need to come together as a country, as we have behind the COVID initiative, behind the vaccination initiative, and initiatives to address the impact of COVID. I think we need to come together as a country to say we are all in the same boat, and we will move in one direction, and we will not, as a country, tolerate any forces that try to actually destabilize us.
We're going to come back to you if you don't mind staying with us, getting a business reaction to what the president said tonight. But let's throw in some political reaction. I understand we have on the line DA leader John Steenhuisen. Mr. Steenhuisen, your response.
Good evening to you, and good evening to the viewers, and of course to Mr. Cavadia as well. I think there's something to welcome this evening in the President's speech, the TERS extension. If we can get this right and get it out there quickly, it might be the bridge that many of our businesses need to survive this next little period of lockdown. A reopening of restaurants, limited capacity, also to be welcomed, but how the impact of alcohol bans on that profitability of those restaurants will remain to be seen, but certainly better than having them closed up. But I think the big question on everyone's mind this evening is around the ongoing violence that we've seen around the country. It's not sporadic, as the President said this evening in his speech. It is widespread, certainly in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, with all indications it's already started to spread into provinces like Mpumalanga, and others. And I think tomorrow is going to be a very, very important day for the President to match his strong words with strong action against the perpetrators. We're a law-based society, a rules-based society. We cannot have a descent into a free-for-all as we've seen over the country. I think the President also needs to acknowledge that this is an internal ANC battle that has spilled onto the streets of South Africa. There's very little acknowledgement of that fact this evening, that this is a battle that's raging within the ANC around Mr. Jacob Zuma and his incarceration last week.
All right, thank you for your response, and let's see if we can get a reaction to that, because we do have the ANC spokesperson Pule Mabe for us on the line. Mr. Mabe, can you respond to a statement like that this is an internal ANC battle spilling onto South African streets?
Thank you, and evening to your viewers. I think it's a little bit unfair because the African National Congress has been seized with this matter. We have issued a statement calling for calm in KwaZulu-Natal. So it is unfair to characterize what is happening in KwaZulu-Natal to be a matter that has got to do with internal business in the African National Congress, especially when the decisions that have got to do, even with the incarceration of former President Jacob Zuma, were taken by the courts of the land. The ANC has said that it must remove itself from decisions of the courts. We have expressed our concern about the situation. We believe that all of us must be able to prevail, talk sense into the situation itself, call for calm, appeal that the situation as it obtains now is not helpful. One, both to the economic mobility of the whole country, but two, to the social stability of the people of KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah.
It's not helpful.
Mr. Mabe, with all due respect, the ANC did make some decisions. So when there were gatherings, for example, outside Nkandla in contravention of lockdown level 4, did the ANC condemn those gatherings? What we did see was members of the National Executive Committee going to Nkandla. We saw the police minister engaging with the former president. Looking back, were those all the right decisions?
Well, the ANC did condemn those activities. We have issued numerous statements expressing ourselves on those. We've actually said that even the display of guns in the air is not in keeping with what the ANC stands for. Remember, the African National Congress stands for peace. We do understand that there could have been people genuinely angered by the actions that led to the incarceration of former President Jacob Zuma. We ourselves have said so. We've commended our former president for his bravery. The fact that he handed himself over, avoided what could have been a bloodbath, ensured that he places the interests of the country first. That was motivational to all of us. President Zuma, just to conclude, is a freedom fighter, was incarcerated at the Robben Island, has been part of democratizing the Republic of South Africa. So the democratization of our country was led, amongst others, by him.
So Mr. Mabe,
of his generation.
What would you say to people tonight, very quickly, the protesters who are receiving messages come out in support of the former president and block roads and do a whole lot of other things as well?
Well, as the African National Congress, we are concerned. We do not believe that the economic blockages, coming out to the streets, looting of shops, destruction of property, represent a fair way of dealing with the crisis that is obtaining on the ground.
Okay.
We think that they must use legitimate platforms to be able to register their concerns. I mean, we are a democratic country. There are many other platforms that could be utilized to do this. All we want is peace in the land.
All right. Thank you very much. Pule Mabe, spokesperson for the ANC. Let's go to Vuyani Pambo, spokesperson for the EFF. Mr. Pambo, your response firstly to what President Cyril Ramaphosa said tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having us on your show. We really note the address by the president as regurgitated, lockdowns once again, which have proven not to be effective. We are back to square one. 14 days later, these lockdowns have not yielded any results. It is clear, and we have been saying this, that lockdowns have not proven to work, and cases have continued to spiral out of control because capital continues to operate as per normal, largely in the mining sector and many other industries. We also note that the president failed to address the question of elections. He says that in 14 days, once again, he will then assess the situation. You can't keep on doing the same thing and expecting different results. The only answer to the problems of COVID-19, or rather the challenge which is COVID-19 right now in this country, is vaccination. Without vaccination, we will not win the fight against this pandemic. We cannot continue to use lockdowns as a response to COVID-19. We did that because there was no vaccine in the world. Now that there are vaccines, we ought to be going all over. There is no clear plan of vaccinating South Africans. We know that Sinovac is ready to give us. We know that Sputnik V is ready to give us. But we are continuously force-fed this J&J because he is involved in J&J and is benefiting from it. Now, we as South Africans, at least now that we are sober and we have not had alcohol, we must think clearly and know for a fact that we are now on our own and we are now doomed to the grave. By the time we reach herd immunity, our people would have buried no less than 2 family members. This is causing serious trauma, not only financially, but mentally to our people. And this is going to drain South Africa of its resources. People with serious skills are dying. People are losing loved ones. The only response, and we repeat this as the EFF, is that we need vaccination.
Right.
The president announces a further lockdown regulation, but does not speak to election. He knows that 2 days later, after that day when he addresses the nation, we have to go for voter registration. It is clear that this is censorship. He goes on, takes platform. He says that people must not post certain videos. He further announces censorship. We are under dictatorship.
Okay.
This is a clear indication of fascism. We know what is the answer, and the answer is vaccination. We need to.
Okay, Mr. Pambo, I think you have asserted that. Thank you very much for your time tonight, EFF spokesperson Vuyani Pambo. And we're running out of time towards the end of the show. Let's quickly ask Kaz Cavadio to wrap this up. We were getting some business response, Mr. Cavadio. We were talking about the protest action. The reality is that many businesses who are allowed to open under this lockdown level 4 will not be able to open tomorrow. That is pretty alarming. Do you agree?
No, absolutely. And that's the problem with this action. As I said earlier, it's not a large group of people, but they create fear, they create chaos. And as a result of that, people are fearful of going about their daily lives, whether it's opening up businesses or going to work or whatever. And that's why this needs to be dealt with very, very strongly. And some degree of normalcy needs to be brought to bear quickly so that we are not again going back economically and we are not again putting people's lives at risk. So law and order must take its course. Security forces must act decisively on this and they must quell these incidents of thuggery as quickly as possible.
What is the responsibility of business? We're hearing, for example, that a takeaway chain, I'm not going to mention the name, I think that could cause more problems, but one of them will be targeted tomorrow. Should businesses allow workers to stay at home? It's a very difficult situation.
Well, I'm sure if any particular business has intelligence that they will be targeted, they will take the necessary precautions to protect both their businesses and their employees. I can't comment on any individual business because I don't have information on that. But I think businesses will act responsibly. They will not endanger businesses. They will not endanger their employees or their customers. But it's not the sort of situation we should be having. And you know, if police need more resources and more capacity, they must put that in place. If, you know, one of the things that these people are doing is they're also breaking COVID regulations. And maybe the government should use the regulation that they have at hand to actually control COVID and deal with people breaking COVID regulations and apply those as well. I think if the police can quell this, they must do that in the next few days. If they can't, then government needs to put its heads together and see what other elements of the security forces need to be brought to bear.
Thank you very much, the CEO of Business Unity South Africa, Kaz Cavadio. And that was some of the reaction to President Cyril Ramaphosa's address tonight. We'll bring you more political and other reaction when the Globe takes over. But from me and the Full View team, thank you for being with us.